December 31st, 2024, will be a date I can never erase from my memory. I am Dahlia Jernigan. I'm 71 years old, and that night, my own son shattered my heart with words that still burn inside me. If you're seeing this, please subscribe and tell me where you're from, because I need you to know that what happened to me can happen to any mother who has given everything for her children. That night, when everyone was celebrating and I had prepared the most beautiful New Year's Eve dinner, I approached Marcus with a shy smile and asked him something I am now ashamed to have said. "Where is my gift?" Marcus laughed with a cruelty I had never seen in his eyes. Then he spoke the words that haunt me every night: "Santa doesn't bring presents for ungrateful people." I just nodded, swallowed my tears, and walked away to my small room. But what happened 3 hours later was much, much worse. Marcus called me, desperate, crying like a child, pleading, "Mom, we urgently need $2 million to save the house." That was the moment something inside me broke forever. I responded with the same coldness he had shown me. "Ask Santa Claus for it." To understand how I reached that point of complete breakdown, I have to tell you my story from the beginning. I have to tell you about Preston, my dear husband, who died when Marcus was only 12 years old. Preston was an electrician, and he worked day and night to provide us with a decent life. I remember his calloused hands softly stroking my face after long work shifts. "Dahlia," he used to tell me, "this boy is going to be our pride and joy." How wrong my poor Preston was. When he died in that terrible construction accident, I was left alone with a boy who suddenly became my only reason for living. I sold everything of value. I worked cleaning houses, ironing other people's clothes, and selling baked goods on the corner of the street. My hands became rough, my back bent from carrying so much weight, but every sacrifice was worth it if Marcus could have a better life. I paid for the best schools I could afford. I bought him designer clothes while I wore the same faded skirt for years. When he was hungry, I gave him my meal and told him I had already eaten. Marcus grew into a handsome, intelligent man, successful in business. I felt so proud when people would tell me, "What a wonderful son you have, Dahlia." Then Blair Hawthorne appeared in his life. She was beautiful and elegant, wearing scarlet dresses that cost more than my 6 months' salary. From the first day I met her, I knew that woman didn't want me near her man. Blair had a subtle way of making me feel small. "Dahlia, don't you think it's time Marcus and I had some intimacy?" she'd ask with a fake smile while stroking my son's arm. And Marcus, my Marcus, who used to defend me from everyone and everything, started to change. He began to see me as Blair saw me, as a nuisance. Family dinners became tense. I would cook his favorite dishes for hours, the collard greens, the homemade mac and cheese, and he would barely touch them. "Mom, Blair prefers more sophisticated food," he would say without looking me in the eye. Little by little, I became a stranger in my own home, the home Preston and I bought with so much hard work, where we raised our son with infinite love. Blair was constantly redecorating. "This house needs a more modern touch, don't you think, Marcus?" she'd say. And every change erased a little more of Preston's memory, the memory of our happy family. I sought refuge in my small spare room, the only space Blair hadn't touched yet. There, I kept photos of Preston, the love letters he wrote to me when we were dating, and the drawings Marcus made when he was small, telling me I was the prettiest mom in the world. But that night of December 31st, everything changed forever. The New Year's Eve night started like all the other special occasions over the last few years. I was working alone in the kitchen while Marcus and Blair got ready for the celebration. I had been preparing everything since 6 o'clock in the morning. The glazed ham Marcus had loved since childhood, the buttered mashed potatoes Preston used to say were the best in the world, and the sweet potato pie I had perfected over 30 years. My joints ached terribly. At 71, standing for so many hours had become torture. But I wanted that night to be perfect. I wanted to recover, if only for a few hours, my son, the Marcus who used to hug me and tell me I was the best mom in the universe. Blair came down the stairs wearing a sparkling gold dress that shimmered like the sun. She looked radiant, perfect, like a queen descending to greet her subjects. She looked me up and down, noticing my old yellow dress, the only decent one I had left. "Dahlia," she asked, with that condescending smile I knew so well, "don't you have anything more appropriate for the occasion?" Marcus appeared behind her, impeccable in his black suit. He didn't even greet me. He went straight to Blair and whispered something in her ear that made her laugh. "Mom," he told me without looking at me, "Blair and I will be in the main living room with our guests. You can stay in the kitchen if you want." My guests. As if I were the housekeeper in my own home. Throughout the night, I listened to them laugh, toast, and celebrate. I stayed in the kitchen, serving the food I had prepared with so much love, picking up dirty plates, and cleaning up every mess they made. When the clock struck midnight and everyone hugged and wished each other a Happy New Year, I was alone, washing glasses in the sink. Tears fell into the soapy water as I listened to their joyful voices in the distance. It was then that I decided to approach them. He was my son. It was my house. It was my right to be there with them at that special moment. When I entered the living room, conversation stopped. Blair looked at me as if an unwelcome ghost had appeared. The guests, people I didn't know, watched me with curiosity. "Marcus," I said, my voice trembling, "and where is my gift?" The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus exchanged a look with Blair before letting out that cruel laugh that still gives me nightmares. "Santa doesn't bring presents for ungrateful people," he told me, as all his friends laughed too. Blair added, like a final dagger, "Dahlia, I think it's very late for you. Shouldn't you be sleeping?" I went to my room feeling like a scolded child. I sat on my small bed, hugging Preston's photo, and cried like I hadn't cried since the day of his funeral. "Preston," I whispered to his photograph, "our son is lost. I don't know where the boy we loved so much went." But at 3 o'clock in the morning, my phone rang. It was Marcus, and his voice no longer held any of the arrogance from a few hours earlier. He was crying, almost screaming with desperation. "Mom, please, help me. We need $2 million urgently, or we will lose everything." For the first time in years, my son needed me. But something had changed inside me that night. Something had broken forever. "Ask Santa Claus for it," I replied, and hung up the phone. The following days were a nightmare. Marcus came home increasingly desperate and aggressive. Blair no longer wore elegant dresses. She walked around in pajamas with deep dark circles under her eyes, yelling at Marcus that he had to get the money no matter what. "It's your mother," Blair screamed. "She has to have something saved. All old people keep money stashed away." Marcus began checking my things, looking for money I didn't have. He opened every drawer, every closet, desperate to find a fortune that only existed in his imagination. "Mom, I know Dad left you something," he told me, his eyes bloodshot. He always talked about having plans, about making sure we were well taken care of. But I didn't know anything. Preston had died so suddenly that we never had time to talk about inheritances or life insurance. I was only left with debt and the responsibility of raising Marcus alone. One evening, while Blair and Marcus were arguing in the living room, I clearly heard what this whole mess was about. "I told him it was a safe investment," Marcus shouted. "Luis assured me we'd triple the money in 6 months." Blair responded hysterically, "You're an idiot. You gave $2 million to a scammer, and now the private creditors want their money or they'll take the house." That's when I understood everything. My son had been the victim of a Ponzi scheme. He had mortgaged our house, the house Preston bought with the sweat of his brow, to invest in a false promise of easy wealth. And now they expected me, a 71-year-old woman living on a miserable Social Security check, to save him. But the worst was yet to come. 3 days after New Year's, Marcus and Blair came downstairs with suitcases in their hands. "Mom," Marcus said, without being able to look me in the eye, "Blair and I are going to stay at her sister's house for a few days." "And me?" I asked, although I already knew the answer. You're an adult, Mom. It's time for you to be independent." Blair smiled maliciously from behind him. Dahlia, it's time for you to stop being a burden to Marcus. He has his own life to live. And they left. They left me alone in that cold house, with no money, with no one. My own son had abandoned me in my moment of greatest vulnerability. That night, sitting in the kitchen where I had prepared thousands of meals for Marcus, where I had patched up his scrapes when he was a boy, where I had mourned Preston's death, I realized that my life as I knew it was over. But what I didn't know was that this apparent tragedy would be the beginning of the greatest revelation of my life. The days that followed Marcus and Blair's departure were the darkest of my life. I was completely alone in that huge house, which suddenly felt like a mausoleum full of painful memories. The refrigerator was nearly empty. Marcus had taken everything he could before leaving, barely leaving me with some leftovers, and the humiliation of knowing that my own son considered me a burden. For the first few nights, I couldn't sleep. Every noise startled me, and every shadow reminded me how vulnerable I was. At 71, after a life completely devoted to my family, I was utterly alone. I tried to call Marcus several times, but his phone was always busy or simply went unanswered. When I finally managed to reach him, his voice was ice cold. "Mom, I already told you, Blair and I need our space. You have to learn to fend for yourself." "But Marcus," I pleaded, "I'm your mother. I have nowhere to go." "Look for a nursing home or something like that. I can't carry you for the rest of my life." Those words hurt me more than any physical blow I could have received. The boy I had nursed through fevers, whom I had comforted after every nightmare, whom I had defended from all the problems in the world, was now treating me like trash. A week after they left, a man appeared at my door. He was tall, dressed in a gray suit, and carrying a folder full of documents. "Mrs. Jernigan?" he asked in a professional voice. "Yes, that's me." "I am Mr. Garcia. I represent your son Marcus's creditors. I am here to notify you that this property will be foreclosed in 30 days if the $2 million debt is not settled." The world crashed down on me. Not only had I lost my son, but I would also lose the house where I had built my whole life with Preston. "But sir," I said, my voice breaking, "this is my house. I didn't sign any documents." "I'm sorry, ma'am. Your son mortgaged the property using documents that certify him as the sole owner. You have 30 days to vacate." When the man left, I collapsed on the living room floor. I cried until I had no more tears left. Preston, my dear Preston, had worked so hard to buy this house, and now Marcus had lost it on a foolish bet. That night, I made the hardest decision of my life. With the few savings I had, I looked for a tiny room in a dilapidated boarding house in South Atlanta. The place was depressing. The walls were stained with moisture. I shared the bathroom with other tenants, and the mattress was so old that my back hurt every morning. But it was the only thing I could afford. The landlady was a large woman named Ms. Cleo, who looked at me with contempt every time I passed her in the hallway. "I expect prompt payment," she would say, "because I don't give charity to anyone here." My routine became mechanical and sad. I would wake up, eat bread and tea for breakfast, and go out looking for work that no one wanted to give to a 71-year-old woman. I would return in the evenings, exhausted and without hope. The nights were the worst. Lying in that uncomfortable bed, listening to the screams of the other tenants through the thin walls, I wondered how I had reached this point in my life. One afternoon, while walking downtown looking for any job I could do, I saw Marcus and Blair leaving an expensive midtown restaurant. She was wearing a new violet dress, and he looked relaxed and happy, as if he didn't have a care in the world. I hid behind a telephone pole so they wouldn't see me. I watched them laugh, kiss, and act like a perfect couple, while I fought every day just to get money for a piece of bread. Blair carried a leather purse that cost more than my 3 months' rent. Marcus wore a new watch on his wrist that gleamed in the sun. Clearly they had found money somewhere, but it wasn't to save the family home or to help his mother. That night, I called Marcus one more time. I needed to know if he even remembered I existed. "What do you want, Mom?" he answered impatiently. "Marcus, I'm your mother. I've been living in a horrible boarding house. I don't have a job, and I barely have enough to eat. Please help me. Mom, I already told you to be independent. Blair and I have our own expenses. But I saw you today at that restaurant. You have money to spend on luxuries, but not to help your mother? That is not your problem, he screamed at me. Stop spying on me and find a way to sort out your life. And he hung up. I sat there in my miserable room, holding the phone, feeling my heart break into 1,000 pieces. My own son preferred to spend money on frivolous things for his wife than to help the woman who gave him life. 2 weeks later, my situation worsened even further. Ms. Cleo raised my rent without warning. Prices have gone up, she said indifferently. Pay up or get out. I had no way to get the extra money. I had spent my last savings on medicine for the arthritis that kept me bedridden some days. One night, while organizing my few belongings, thinking I would have to look for an even cheaper place, I found an old shoebox I had brought from the house. It was a shoebox where I kept important letters and documents. I started looking through the papers nostalgically. Love letters from Preston, birth certificates, old house bills. But at the bottom of the box, wrapped in yellow plastic, I found an envelope I had never seen before. The envelope had my name written on it in Preston's handwriting. My heart started beating faster. I opened it with trembling hands and found a letter that would change everything. My dearest Dahlia, the letter read, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer with you. I know you always worried that we didn't have much money saved, but I want you to know that we do. For years, I have been secretly investing to secure your future and Marcus's. I couldn't believe what I was reading. Preston continued. At the First American Reserve Bank, account number 847629, there is $200,000 that I've been saving. But that's not all. I also bought stock in the Georgia Power Company where I worked, and according to my calculations, it must be worth much more now. The letter ended with specific instructions on how to access the money and the address of a lawyer named Mr. Julian Vance, who had all the legal documents. I was paralyzed for several minutes. I couldn't process that Preston had kept this secret for so long. I couldn't believe that after all these months of suffering, humiliation, and feeling abandoned, there was a way out. But more than the money, what excited me was realizing that Preston had always thought of me. He had always wanted to protect me, even after his death. With trembling hands, I put the letter in my purse. The next day, I would go look for that lawyer, Mr. Julian Vance. My life was about to change completely, but Marcus still had no idea what was coming. That night, I was able to sleep for the first time in weeks. I dreamed of Preston, and in my dream he hugged me and said, "You don't have to suffer anymore, my love. It's time for you to be respected as you deserve." What I didn't know was that Preston's revelation would only be the beginning of a chain of discoveries that would end up destroying Marcus and Blair forever. At 8 o'clock the next morning, I was already standing in front of the building where the lawyer, Mr. Julian Vance, worked. I had spent the entire night awake, rereading Preston's letter over and over, making sure I wasn't dreaming. The building was imposing, with glass windows that reflected the morning sun. My hands were sweating as I held the crumpled letter. After so many months of humiliation, I found it hard to believe there could be a way out of my nightmare. The receptionist, a young woman with curly hair, looked at me curiously when I explained that I needed to see Mr. Vance about a matter concerning Preston Jernigan. "One moment, please," she said while dialing a number. "Mr. Vance, there is a lady here who says she has a letter from Preston Jernigan." I heard a surprised voice on the other side of the line. The receptionist looked at me with wide eyes. "He says he can receive you immediately. Office 205, second floor." Julian Vance was a man in his 50s, gray-haired, with glasses that gave him a distinguished air. When I entered his office, he immediately stood up from his desk. "You are Dahlia, Preston's wife?" he asked with a warm smile. "Yes, sir. I found this letter among his things," I said, handing him the envelope. Julian read the letter carefully and then looked at me with a mixture of relief and concern. "Mrs. Jernigan, I have been waiting for you to appear for almost 15 years. Your husband left me very specific instructions that I could only give this information to you personally." I sat down in the chair across from his desk, feeling my legs tremble. "Preston was a very prudent man," Julian continued. "He didn't just save money, he made very intelligent investments. The Georgia Power Company's shares split several times, and their value multiplied exponentially." Julian opened a thick file with Preston's name on the cover. "Mrs. Jernigan, you don't just own $200,000. Between the savings accounts, the stock investments, and the government bonds Preston bought, your current estate is approximately $3 million. I felt the world stop. $3 million. While I had been living in that horrible boarding house, eating stale bread and begging my son for help, a fortune was waiting for me. "But that's not all," Julian continued. "Preston also fully paid off the house where you lived. I have the original deed and title here, which proves the property is in your name, not your son's." "But Marcus mortgaged the house," I said, confused. Julian frowned. "That is impossible, ma'am. Only the legal owner can mortgage a property. If your son did that, he committed serious fraud." In that moment, I understood the magnitude of what had happened. Marcus had not just abandoned and humiliated me, he had forged documents to steal my house. "We need to act quickly," Julian told me. "We'll go to the bank immediately to activate your accounts, and then we will file a complaint for fraud against your son." "I don't know if I want to file a complaint against Marcus," I said, hesitating. "After all, he is my son." Julian looked at me seriously. "Mrs. Jernigan, your son left you living in misery while having access to money that wasn't his. He used forged documents to mortgage your home. This is not just family betrayal, it is a felony." We left the office and headed to the bank. Along the way, Julian explained all the legal details, but I could barely concentrate. My mind was full of images of Marcus and Blair spending money in expensive restaurants while I struggled to pay for a miserable room. At the bank, after verifying my identity with several documents, the manager showed me the bank statements I hadn't seen in 15 years. It was real. Everything was completely real. "What do you want to do with the money, ma'am?" the manager asked me. "For now, leave it where it is," I replied. "I need time to process all this." When we left the bank, Julian gave me his personal card. "Mrs. Jernigan, I think it's time for you to recover what is yours. Your house, your dignity, your life. Are you ready to face your son?" That afternoon, I returned to my room at the boarding house, but everything had changed. I was no longer an abandoned old woman begging for compassion. I was a woman with resources, with power, with the capacity to completely change my situation. But before making any move, I needed a plan. Marcus and Blair had played with me as if I were a helpless fool. It was time to show them how terribly wrong they were. That night, for the first time in months, I didn't call Marcus begging for help. Instead, I stayed awake, planning my next move. The next day, Julian called me with even more shocking news. "Mrs. Jernigan, I've been investigating the situation with your house, and I found something very interesting. The creditors Marcus owes money to don't seem to exist. The whole story about the $2 million debt appears to be a lie." "What do you mean?" I asked, confused. "I believe your son and daughter-in-law are trying to scam you. They likely invented the whole debt story so you would give them money they thought you had hidden." The betrayal was even worse than I had imagined. Marcus had not only abandoned me, but he had also tried to rob me using an elaborate lie. "But why did they leave me to live in that boarding house if they wanted my money?" I asked. "They probably thought the suffering would make you more willing to help them. It's a very common psychological manipulation tactic." I felt a rage I had never experienced before. It wasn't just pain over my son's betrayal, but a burning fury toward the people who had coldly calculated my suffering. That afternoon, I decided to take the first step of my revenge. I called Marcus, but this time I wasn't pleading. "Hello, Marcus," I said in a calm voice. "Mom, how are you?" His voice sounded fake, as if he were playing the role of the worried son. "I'm fine. In fact, I'm better than ever." That's good to hear. Marcus, I wanted to ask you a question about the house. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. What do you want to know? I wanted to know exactly which documents you used to mortgage it. Mom, why are you asking that? I already explained that. Just answer my question, Marcus. His voice became nervous. I used the documents Dad left me. That's interesting, because I just found out that Dad never left you any documents for the house. The silence that followed confirmed everything I needed to know. Mom, I can explain. You don't need to explain anything, Marcus. I'll see you soon. And I hung up the phone. That night, as I prepared to sleep on my last night in that horrible boarding house, I smiled for the first time in months. Marcus and Blair had no idea of the storm that was coming for them. Preston had found a way to protect me even after death, and now it was my turn to protect his memory and reclaim everything they had taken from me. The war had just begun, but this time I had all the weapons. The following days were the most intense of my life. Along with Julian, we developed a strategy that would not only return what was mine, but would expose every lie Marcus and Blair had constructed. Julian hired a private investigator named Avery to follow Marcus and Blair for a week. The results were even more devastating than we had imagined. Mrs. Jernigan, Julian said to me while reviewing the report, your son and daughter-in-law have been living a life of extreme luxury. 5-star restaurants, expensive hotels, shopping at exclusive boutiques. They spent more than $50,000 in the last month alone. Avery, the investigator, showed me photographs that broke my heart. Marcus and Blair at a luxury spa, her wearing a silver dress that cost more than my entire year's Social Security check. Marcus in a new suit, smiling while toasting with champagne. Where did they get so much money? I asked. Here's the interesting part, Julian continued. Blair comes from a very wealthy family. Her father owns several companies, and she has access to an account with several $100,000. So they never needed my help? Never. It was all an elaborate performance to gain access to what they thought you had hidden away. The cruelty of the situation hit me like a hammer. While I had spent sleepless nights worrying about Marcus's financial problems, he had been living like a millionaire using his father-in-law's money. But that's not all, Avery added. I also discovered that they have been telling their friends that you died. What? Apparently, they were ashamed to explain why they had kicked an elderly woman out of her own house, so they invented that you had passed away from cancer 6 months ago. The news took my breath away. They had not only abandoned me physically, they had completely erased me from their existence. To all intents and purposes, Dahlia Jernigan no longer existed in Marcus's life. That revelation lit a fire of determination in my chest that I didn't know I had. It was time to remind them that I was very much alive. Julian and I went directly to the Fulton County Sheriff's Office. We filed the formal complaint for real estate fraud against Marcus with all the evidence that he had forged documents to mortgage my house. The detective in charge of the case, an older man named Detective Reynolds, reviewed all our documents carefully. Ma'am, this is a very clear case of documentary fraud. Your son could face between 5 and 10 years in state prison for this. What do we need to do? Julian asked. We'll issue an arrest warrant. Do you know where we can find him? I gave them the address of the Piedmont Grand Hotel, where Marcus and Blair were staying, according to the investigator's report. After filing the complaint, Julian took me to a different bank where we opened a new account in my name. We transferred $1 million for immediate use and left the rest in investments that would generate monthly income for the rest of my life. Mrs. Jernigan, the bank manager told me, with this capital, you could live comfortably without ever working again. Your passive income would be approximately $12,000 a month. $12,000 a month. While Marcus had left me to survive on less than $300. That afternoon, I decided to take the next step in my plan. I rented the presidential suite at the city's most exclusive hotel, the Piedmont Grand Hotel, the same one where Marcus and Blair had been staying. I bought new clothes, had my hair done at the hotel salon, and for the first time in months, I felt like the dignified woman Preston had loved. The dress I chose was coral, elegant but appropriate for my age. The shoes were comfortable but sophisticated. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a transformed woman. I was no longer the frail old woman begging for compassion. I was Dahlia Jernigan, Preston's widow, the woman who had raised a son with infinite love and was now reclaiming her place in the world. That night, I called Marcus from my suite's phone. "Mom?" His voice sounded surprised. "Where are you calling from? I don't recognize this number." "Hello, Marcus. How is life at the Piedmont Grand Hotel?" There was a long silence. "How do you know I'm here?" "I know many things, son. For example, I know Blair spent $3,000 on a dress last week. I know you dined at a Michelin-starred restaurant on Tuesday. I know you told your friends I had died of cancer." "Mom, I can explain." "You don't need to explain anything, but I do need you to come see me tomorrow. I'm in the presidential suite at the same hotel where you are staying." "The presidential suite, Mom? How?" "Tomorrow at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and bring Blair with you." "But Mom..." "It's not a request, Marcus. It's an order." And I hung up the phone. The next day, exactly at 3 o'clock, I heard a knock on my suite door. I opened it and found Marcus and Blair standing in the hallway, both with looks of total confusion. Marcus wore jeans and a wrinkled shirt, very different from the elegant suits he had been wearing. Blair wore a simple orange dress with no makeup, as if they had rushed out of their room. "Mom," Marcus said, slowly walking in, "what is all this? How can you afford this suite?" "Sit down," I told them, pointing to the Italian leather sofa in the center of the living room. Blair looked around with wide eyes. The suite had huge windows with a view of the city, furniture that cost more than a car, and fresh flowers on every table. "Marcus," I began in a calm voice, "for the last few months, you have treated me like trash. You kicked me out of my own house, you left me to live in a horrible boarding house, and you told your friends I had died." "Mom, I would never—" "Silence!" I shouted with an authority I didn't know I possessed. "I'm talking now." Both Marcus and Blair shrank into the sofa. "I also know that you forged documents to mortgage my house, that you invented a $2 million debt that never existed, and that this whole time you have had access to Blair's family money." Blair tried to speak, but I silenced her with a look. "But the thing that hurts me the most, Marcus, is that you made me believe I was a burden. You made me feel useless, forgotten, as if my life had no value." Tears began to fall down Marcus's cheeks. "Mom, I'm so sorry. Blair convinced me that—" "Don't blame me!" Blair screamed. "You were the one who said your mother was dramatic and manipulative." "Blair, shut up!" Marcus retorted. I watched them fight amongst themselves and felt a strange satisfaction. Their perfect alliance against me was crumbling. "Enough!" I said firmly. "You are both equally guilty, but you need to know something important." I stood up and walked toward the window, turning my back to them. "Your father, Marcus, was a much more intelligent man than either of us thought. For years, he secretly invested every extra penny he earned." I turned to face them. "I am a millionaire, Marcus. I have $3 million that Preston left me, and the house has always been mine." Marcus's face turned white as paper. Blair opened her mouth, but no sound came out. "That means that every day I was left to suffer in that boarding house, every night I went hungry, every tear I shed begging you for help, was completely unnecessary." Marcus stood up, trembling. "Mom, please forgive me. We didn't know that." "Of course you didn't know," I exploded, "because you never bothered to ask, because you decided that I wasn't worth anything." Before knowing the truth, Blair finally found her voice. "Dahlia, if we had known you had money, you would have treated me better." I finished the sentence for her. "Exactly. That is the difference between you and me. I loved you when I thought I had nothing. You only love me if I have something to give you." Just then the door knocked again. It was Julian, accompanied by 2 police officers. "Mrs. Jernigan," Julian said, "we have come to execute the arrest warrant." Marcus and Blair immediately stood up, panic evident on their faces. "Marcus Jernigan," one of the officers said, You are under arrest for documentary fraud and usurpation of real estate." As they put the handcuffs on my son, he looked at me with tears in his eyes. "Mom, please, don't let them take me." For a moment, my mother's heart wanted to give in. But then I remembered all the nights I had cried in that horrible boarding house while he lived like a king. "Marcus," I said in a firm voice, "ask Santa Claus for it." Seeing Marcus arrested in front of my eyes was one of the most painful and liberating moments of my life. On the one hand, my mother's heart broke, seeing my son handcuffed like a common criminal. On the other, I felt a deep satisfaction seeing that there were finally consequences for all the damage he had caused me. Blair started screaming hysterically when the officers took Marcus away. "This is your fault, you old hag," she screamed with pure hatred in her eyes. "You ruined our lives." "No, Blair," I replied with glacial calm. "You ruined your own lives when you decided to betray me." Julian approached Blair with a professional smile. "Ma'am, you are also under investigation for complicity in the fraud. I suggest you hire a lawyer." Blair turned pale. Without Marcus there to protect her, she suddenly looked very small and vulnerable. "But I didn't know the documents were fake," she lied desperately. "The photographs we have of you celebrating after mortgaging the house suggest otherwise," Julian countered, showing her some images Avery had captured. Blair looked at the photos, and her arrogance completely collapsed. In the images, she was seen toasting with champagne and laughing while Marcus signed the fake papers at the bank. "Dahlia, please," Blair pleaded, completely changing her attitude. "I know we made mistakes, but you can withdraw the complaint. Marcus is your son." "Marcus stopped being my son the day he threw me out onto the street like a dog," I replied. "And you stopped being my daughter-in-law when you treated me like I was your servant." Blair tried to approach me, but Julian stepped in the way. "Mrs. Hawthorne, I recommend you leave before we also issue an arrest warrant against you." Blair gave me one last look full of resentment before running out of the suite. When Julian and I were alone, we sat in silence for a few minutes. The suite, which had been full of tension, now felt strangely peaceful. "How do you feel, Mrs. Jernigan?" Julian asked me. "Empty," I replied honestly. "I know I did the right thing, but seeing my son arrested is not something a mother can celebrate." "You didn't arrest him," Julian reminded me. "He arrested himself when he decided to commit a crime." That night, alone in my luxurious suite, I sat by the window watching the city lights. For the first time in months, I didn't have to worry about money, a roof over my head, or food, but I also had no family. The next day, Julian called me with disturbing news. "Mrs. Jernigan, there is something else you need to know. Marcus did not act alone in this. We have discovered that Blair has connections to a network of scammers who specialize in robbing properties from the elderly." "What do you mean?" "Blair has been married before. Her first husband was an older man who died under suspicious circumstances, leaving her his entire fortune. Her second husband, also older, was institutionalized after she had him declared mentally incompetent. The pieces of the puzzle began to fit together in a terrifying way. Are you saying Blair chose Marcus specifically to rob me?" "It's highly likely. Investigators found evidence that Blair had been researching your family months before she even met Marcus. She knew about the house. She knew you were a widow. She knew you had an unmarried son with access to your assets." I sat heavily in a chair. Marcus hadn't just been cruel to me. He had been the victim of calculated manipulation. "But that doesn't excuse him," I continued, thinking aloud. "Blair may have influenced him, but he made the final decisions." "Exactly. And there's more bad news. Blair disappeared last night. She emptied her bank accounts and left without a trace." "She left?" "Yes, but we have search warrants across the country. She can't hide forever." That afternoon, I decided to visit Marcus in jail. I needed to see him. I needed to understand how he had reached that point. The jail was a depressing place, full of metallic sounds and unpleasant smells. Marcus was in a solitary cell, wearing an orange uniform that made him look much younger and vulnerable. When he saw me, he immediately started to cry. "Mom, Thank you for coming. I thought you never wanted to see me again. I don't know if I want to see you, Marcus, I told him honestly, but I need answers. Blair convinced me you had money hidden away. She said all older mothers kept fortunes for emergencies and that we just needed to pressure you a little to share it. And you thought abandoning me in a horrible boarding house was pressuring me a little? Marcus lowered his head in shame. Blair said that if you were too comfortable, you would never help us, that you needed to feel real urgency to get the money out. Marcus, did you ever think of simply asking me if I needed help? Of treating me like your mother instead of your enemy? Blair convinced me you were manipulative, that you were pretending to be poor to control me emotionally, he cried, tears streaming down his cheeks as he spoke. Mom, she completely brainwashed me. She made me believe that you were the problem in my life. And what do you believe now? Now I know I'm an idiot. I lost the only person who truly loved me for a woman who only wanted to use me. Blair, she disappeared? The shock on his face was genuine. She left? She abandoned me? Exactly how you abandoned me. Marcus gripped the bars of his cell. Mom, please forgive me. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I swear I'll do everything possible to fix this. How, Marcus? How are you going to fix the months I spent crying in that boarding house? How are you going to fix the pain of believing your own son hated me? I don't know, he admitted, but I will try for the rest of my life. I looked at my son, the boy I had raised with so much love, turned into a man destroyed by his own greed and stupidity. Marcus, I'm going to do something for you. I'm going to pay for the best lawyer I can find. His eyes lit up with hope. But I'm not doing it for you, I continued. I'm doing it for the memory of your father who loved you unconditionally. Mom, and when you get out of here, if you get out, you are going to have to prove to me that the Marcus I raised still exists somewhere. I will. I promise you. Promises mean nothing now, Marcus. Only actions do. When I left the jail, I felt emotionally exhausted. Julian was waiting for me in the parking lot. How do you feel after talking to him? Confused, I admitted. Part of me wants to save him, and part of me thinks he deserves everything that's happening to him. It's natural to feel that way. He is your son, no matter what he did. Julian, I need to ask you something. Do you think Marcus could go to prison for a long time? With a good lawyer, and considering he was a victim of manipulation, he can probably reduce his sentence to 2 or 3 years. I want you to hire the best criminal defense attorney in the city. Money is not an issue. Are you sure, Mrs. Jernigan? I'm not doing this for Marcus, I explained. I'm doing it for me. I need to know that I did everything possible for the son Preston and I raised with love. Julian nodded in understanding. I understand perfectly. That night in my suite, I called a number I hadn't dialed in years. It was Donna, my younger sister who lived in another city. Dahlia, my God, where have you been? I've tried to call you for months. It's a long story, Donna. Can you come see me? I need you. Of course, I'm flying out tomorrow morning. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel completely alone. Marcus had destroyed our relationship, and Blair had disappeared like the coward she was. But I still had people who loved me. The true healing was just beginning. Donna arrived the next day on a morning flight. I hadn't seen her in almost 2 years, but when I saw her get out of the taxi in front of the hotel, I ran to hug her like a child. Donna was 58, 13 years younger than me, but she had always been the strong sister in the family. When Preston died and I sank into grief, she was the one who helped me carry on for Marcus. Dahlia, what is going on? She asked me as we went up to my suite. Your voice sounded terrible on the phone. I told her everything, from the humiliation on New Year's Eve to Marcus's arrest. Donna listened in silence, but I saw her expression change from confusion to horror to absolute fury. That damn boy made you live in a boarding house, she burst out when I finished my story. After everything you sacrificed for him. Donna, please, don't. I won't calm down. Marcus turned into a monster, and you don't have to protect him anymore. It was strange to hear someone else validate my pain. For months, I had doubted myself, wondering if I really was an ungrateful mother, as Marcus had made me believe. "But there's something else I need to tell you," I said. "Something about Preston I never knew." I showed her the letter and the bank documents. Donna read everything, her eyes getting wider and wider. "Preston was always smart with money," she finally said, "but I never imagined he managed to save so much. I feel guilty for not knowing it, as if I failed as a wife. Dahlia, Preston protected you. He knew that if anything happened to him, you would need to be financially secure. He did the right thing by keeping this a secret." That afternoon, Donna and I went shopping. Not just for clothes, but for everything I needed to start my new life. Furniture for a new apartment, art for the walls, books to fill my days. "Dahlia," Donna told me while trying on a purple dress in an elegant boutique, "I want you to know something. I never liked Blair." "Why didn't you ever tell me?" "Because you were happy that Marcus had found someone, but that woman had something fake about her from day one. The way she spoke to you like you were her employee made me sick." Marcus always defended her. Marcus was blinded. Blair is beautiful and manipulative, a dangerous combination for an insecure man. Julian found us at the hotel that night with important news. "Ladies, I have information about Blair. They found her in Miami trying to board a flight to Colombia." "Did they arrest her?" Donna asked. "Yes, but there's more. When they searched her, they found forged documents for 3 other elderly victims. Blair has been doing this for years." I sat heavily on the sofa. How many elderly people like me have suffered because of that woman? At least 5 confirmed cases in the last 10 years, all older men with valuable properties, all manipulated until they lost everything. And what about Marcus now? His story is more credible now that we know Blair is a professional scammer. The prosecutor is willing to consider that Marcus was a victim of psychological manipulation. Donna took my hand. "That doesn't excuse what he did to you, but at least it explains why he changed so drastically." The next day, I received an unexpected call. It was Marcus from jail. "Mom, my lawyer just came. He told me Blair was arrested in Miami." "Yes, I heard." "He also told me that she had done this before with other men." Marcus's voice completely broke. "Mom, I was so stupid, so incredibly stupid." "Yes, Marcus, you were. Blair showed me photos of bank accounts. She told me she had investigated our family finances and that you had money hidden. She convinced me that you were greedy, that you were denying me an inheritance that was mine. And you never thought to ask me directly. Blair said that if I asked, you would deny everything and hide the money even better, that the only way to access it was by pressuring you emotionally." It was fascinating and terrifying to hear how Blair had constructed a complete narrative to justify the abuse. "Marcus, I need you to understand something. During those months when I was living in that horrible boarding house, when I ate stale bread because I had no money for anything else, when I cried every night wondering what I had done wrong as a mother, all of that was real. It wasn't an act." "I know, Mom. Now I know, and I hate myself for every second of suffering I caused you." "Hate is useless now, Marcus. What can I do? Tell me, what can I do to fix this?" "I don't know if it can be fixed, son, but if you truly want to try, you're going to have to work very hard to rebuild the trust you destroyed." After hanging up, Donna found me crying in my room. "Are you okay?" "I don't know how to feel, Donna. Part of me wants to forgive him because he was manipulated, but another part of me can't forget the pain he caused me." "It's normal to feel that way, Dahlia. Forgiveness doesn't mean you have to forget or pretend nothing happened." That night, we had a long dinner in my suite, remembering Preston and talking about the future. "What are you going to do with all this money?" Donna asked me. "Honestly, I don't know. For so many years, I lived worrying about every penny. Now I have more money than I could ever spend in the rest of my life." "Preston would be proud to see you like this," Donna said, smiling. "Strong, independent, not letting anyone walk all over you." "Do you think Preston would approve of me pressing charges against Marcus?" Donna looked at me seriously. I think Preston would approve of you protecting yourself. He loved you enough to secure your financial future. I'm sure he would also want you to be respected. The next day, Julian arrived with the lawyer he had hired for Marcus. His name was Mr. Howard, and he had an excellent reputation for defending complicated cases. Mrs. Jernigan, Mr. Howard told me, I have reviewed your son's case, and I believe we can get a reduced sentence, especially now that we know about Blair's scam network. What kind of sentence? Probably 18 months to 2 years, with the possibility of parole after 12 months, if he demonstrates good behavior. And what would Marcus have to do to demonstrate good behavior? Work in rehabilitation programs, psychological therapy, community service. Basically, he would have to show that he understands the seriousness of what he did, and that he is genuinely remorseful. Do you think Marcus is genuinely remorseful? I asked him. Mr. Howard looked at me thoughtfully. I've talked to many criminals in my career. Some fake remorse, others truly feel it. Your son, I believe his remorse is real, but I also believe he is very naive and easily manipulated. That naivete almost destroyed my life. I understand completely, ma'am, and I want you to know that if you choose not to support your son in this, it is completely understandable. That night, alone in my suite, I made a decision that would change everything. It wasn't just about Marcus. It was about the kind of person I wanted to be with my new life. Preston had given me a financial second chance. It was time to decide what kind of emotional second chance I would give myself. I called Julian. Julian, I want to establish a foundation. What kind of foundation? A foundation to help the elderly who have been abandoned or scammed by their own families. I want to turn my pain into something that helps others. That's a beautiful idea, Mrs. Jernigan. And I want Marcus to work in that foundation when he gets out of prison. If he truly wants to redeem himself, he can do it by helping other seniors who suffered the same thing I did. It was perfect. My revenge wouldn't just be to punish Marcus, but to make him part of the solution to a problem he himself had helped create. Preston had protected me with his money. Now it was my turn to protect others with that same money. The transformation from victim to protector was complete. The following months were a whirlwind of legal, emotional, and personal activity. Donna decided to stay with me permanently, and together we began to plan not only my new life, but also the foundation that would be my legacy. Julian helped me legally establish the Preston Jernigan Foundation for Abandoned Seniors. The name honored my husband while making our mission clear. With millions of dollars as initial capital, we could make a real difference in the lives of people who had suffered like me. Dahlia, Donna told me while reviewing the first cases that had come to our attention. Look at this. This 85-year-old lady, Ms. Evelyn, was thrown out of her house by her son after he married a younger woman. Reading Ms. Evelyn's story was like reliving my own hell. Her son had changed the locks on the family home and sent her to a public nursing home where she was mistreated and barely fed. We are going to get her out of there immediately, I decided, and we are going to secure a dignified life for her. In 3 weeks, we had rescued 5 elderly people from horrible situations. Ms. Evelyn, who now lived in a beautiful apartment we paid for, Mr. Sterling, a 78-year-old man who had been scammed by his granddaughter, and Ms. Joyce, an 82-year-old woman whose son had sold her house without her permission. Every case reminded me of how lucky I had been. Preston had left me the resources to defend myself. These people hadn't had that luck. Meanwhile, Marcus remained in prison, awaiting sentencing. His lawyer, Mr. Howard, had successfully negotiated a reduced sentence of 18 months in exchange for Marcus testifying against Blair and her scam network. His testimony will help put a very dangerous criminal behind bars, Mr. Howard told me during one of our meetings. Blair has ruined dozens of lives. Blair faced charges for aggravated fraud, documentary fraud, and criminal association. Prosecutors estimated she could receive between 15 and 20 years in prison. I'm glad to know she won't be able to hurt anyone else, I told Mr. Howard. but that doesn't erase what she did to my family. One day, I received an unexpected letter. It was from Blair, written from her cell in Miami. "Dear Dahlia," the letter said, "I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need you to understand something. It was never personal with you or Marcus. It was just another job for me." I continued reading with a mixture of fascination and repulsion. I studied your family for months before approaching Marcus. I knew about Preston. I knew about the house. I knew you probably had money stashed away. Marcus was the perfect target, unmarried, lonely, with access to family property. I convinced him that you were greedy and manipulative because I needed him to feel resentment toward you. A son who loves his mother would never betray her, but a son who believes his mother is deceiving him absolutely would. I showed him fake documents proving you had secret bank accounts. I invented stories about other families where mothers had denied inheritances to their children. I basically brainwashed him until he believed that stealing your house was justice, not betrayal. The final part of the letter was the most disturbing. Marcus never had a real chance. From the first day I met him, I planned to destroy his relationship with you to access his assets. If you hadn't had as much money as you did, I probably would have ended up killing him in an accident to collect life insurance. That revelation chilled my blood. Blair had not only ruined my relationship with Marcus, she had potentially planned to murder him. That night, I called Marcus at the jail and read him the complete letter. "Mom," Marcus sobbed when he heard it, "she was going to kill me." "Yes, Marcus, and it would have been your fault for being so naive." "How could I have been so stupid? How did I not see the signs?" "Because you wanted to believe there was an easy solution to all your problems. You preferred to believe I was evil rather than accept that life is difficult and requires work." "Mom, when I get out of here, I want to spend the rest of my life making it up to you." "Marcus, I don't want you to spend your life making it up to me. I want you to spend your life being a better person." "How can I do that?" "Donna and I have created a foundation for abandoned seniors. When you get out, if you truly want to redeem yourself, you are going to work there. You will see firsthand the damage that family abandonment causes. You would give me that opportunity?" "I will, on one condition. You understand that it is not a favor I am doing you. It is hard, painful work. You are going to hear stories like mine every single day. I accept. I accept any condition you set." 2 weeks later, Julian brought me news I wasn't expecting. "Mrs. Jernigan, Blair wants to make a deal. She is willing to return all the money she stole from other victims in exchange for a reduced sentence." "How much money?" "Approximately $500,000 from 5 different victims." "And what does she want in return?" "For you to write a letter to the judge recommending clemency because she helped solve other cases." I laughed bitterly. "So now Blair wants to use my suffering to reduce her punishment?" "It's your decision, ma'am, but that money could greatly help your foundation." That night, I discussed it with Donna. "It's blood money," Donna said. "Blair stole it from innocent people." "Exactly. That's why it should be used to help innocent people." "Are you going to write the letter?" "I'm going to write a letter," I decided, "but it's not going to say what Blair expects." The next day, I wrote my letter to the judge. "Your Honor, Blair Hawthorne systematically destroyed my life. She manipulated my son until he became a stranger. She made me believe I was a useless burden to my own family. She potentially planned to murder Marcus after stealing my assets. She does not deserve clemency for returning money she should never have stolen. She deserves the maximum sentence so that she can never again hurt another family as she hurt mine." Julian read the letter and smiled. "I think this letter will ensure Blair receives the full sentence." "Good. Some people don't deserve second chances." Meanwhile, our work at the foundation grew every day. We had helped 23 seniors regain their lives, their property, or simply their dignity. Ms. Evelyn had become one of my best friends. Despite being older than me, she had incredible energy and helped organize activities for the other seniors we had rescued. "Dahlia," Ms. Evelyn told me one afternoon. "I want you to know you saved my life. Literally, I was dying of sadness in that nursing home." "Ms. Evelyn, you would have done the same for me." "I'm not so sure. Turning your pain into help for others requires a very special heart." Mr. Sterling, the man who had been scammed by his granddaughter, also joined us as a volunteer at the foundation. "It's therapeutic," he explained. "Helping others who went through the same thing makes me feel like my suffering had some purpose." One day, I received a completely unexpected visit. It was Dr. Cynthia Reed, an elegant woman in her 40s who introduced herself as a psychologist specializing in family manipulation. "Mrs. Jernigan, I have been following your case and your foundation's work. I would like to offer you my professional services free of charge." "What kind of services?" "Therapy for the victims of family abandonment, but also psychological evaluations to determine if the relatives who abandoned these seniors can be rehabilitated or are lost causes." "Like Marcus?" "Exactly. Your son was a victim of manipulation, but he also made conscious decisions to hurt his mother. We need to determine if he can truly change or if he is simply saying what you want to hear." The idea fascinated me. "How would that work?" "I would psychologically evaluate Marcus, determine his level of genuine remorse, and make recommendations on whether it is safe for you to have a relationship with him in the future." "And if you determine Marcus cannot change? Then you would know you must protect yourself and maintain a permanent distance. And if you determine he can change? Then we could design a rehabilitation program that gives both of you the best possibilities of rebuilding your relationship." I accepted Dr. Reed's proposal immediately. After everything that had happened, I needed a professional opinion on whether Marcus deserved a second chance, or if I should protect myself from more manipulation. The day of Blair's sentencing finally arrived. Donna and I attended to see how this nightmare would end. Blair entered the courtroom handcuffed, wearing an orange prison uniform, very different from the elegant woman I had known. When she saw me, she looked at me with pure hatred, but she no longer intimidated me. Now I was the one who held the power. The judge read my letter aloud, along with the statements from other victims. Blair received 20 years without the possibility of parole for the first 10 years. When the sentence was announced, Blair screamed, "This is unfair. I returned the money." But the judge responded firmly, "Ma'am, you systematically destroyed families for years. Justice has finally caught up to you." I left the courthouse feeling that I had finally closed that chapter of my life. Blair could never hurt anyone again. Now the only thing left was to decide what to do with Marcus. 6 months after Blair's sentencing, Marcus was finally released from prison. He had served 12 months of his 18-month sentence, reduced for good behavior and for completing rehabilitation programs. Dr. Reed had been visiting him weekly for the last 3 months, evaluating his psychological progress and preparing her final report for me. On the day of his release, Donna and I waited for him in the prison parking lot. Marcus came out wearing the same clothes he had on when he was arrested, but he looked completely different. He had lost weight, had deep dark circles under his eyes, and walked with the bowed head of someone who had been genuinely humbled by life. When he saw me, he stopped several feet away as if unsure if he could approach. "Hello, Mom," he said, his voice cracking. "Hello, Marcus." The silence that followed was awkward, full of everything we had lost and everything we might perhaps recover. "How do you feel?" I finally asked him. "Ashamed, remorseful, and very, very grateful that you came." Donna stayed by my side, watching Marcus's every move with protective mistrust. "Marcus," I told him, "before we can talk about any kind of future together, you need to hear what Dr. Reed discovered about your mental state." Dr. Reed had arrived in her own car and approached us with a thick folder in her hands. "Marcus," Dr. Reed began in a professional voice, "during our sessions, I identified several concerning patterns in your personality." Marcus listened without interrupting. "You have a marked tendency to look for easy solutions to complex problems. you also have difficulty accepting full responsibility for your actions, always looking for external factors to justify your decisions. But doctor, Marcus protested, I accept that what I did was wrong. Yes, but in our sessions, you constantly mentioned how much Blair had manipulated you, as if that reduced your culpability. You still have trouble understanding that being manipulated does not excuse you from having made cruel decisions. Donna nodded in approval. It was exactly what she had been saying for months. However, Dr. Reed continued, I also see genuine signs of growth. The rehabilitation programs you completed in prison seem to have had a real impact. You no longer talk about yourself as the principal victim in this situation. What is your professional recommendation? I asked Dr. Reed. I believe Marcus can change, but it will require years of consistent work, not months, years. And any relationship you rebuild must include very clear boundaries and immediate consequences if he ever betrays you again. We drove in silence to the apartment I had rented for Marcus. It was modest but decent, in a working-class neighborhood far from the luxuries he had known with Blair. Mom, Marcus said when we arrived, I know I have no right to ask you for anything, but could you tell me about the foundation? I explained all the work Donna and I had been doing, the lives we had saved, the seniors who had regained their dignity, the legal cases we had won against abusive family members. Ms. Evelyn, the 85-year-old lady whose son abandoned her, now lives in a beautiful apartment and helps other seniors as a volunteer, I told him. Mr. Sterling recovered the house his granddaughter stole from him and now gives talks about family fraud. Marcus listened with tears in his eyes. You turned your pain into something beautiful, he told me, just like Dad would have wanted. And what do you want to do with your pain, Marcus? I want to work with you if you let me. I want to spend every day of my life helping people who suffered because of people like me. It won't be easy, I warned him. You are going to hear stories that will break your heart. You are going to meet seniors who were betrayed by sons exactly like you betrayed me. I know, and I think I need to hear those stories. Donna intervened for the first time in the conversation. Marcus, I'm not going to pretend I trust you, but if your mother decides to give you this opportunity, I'm going to be watching your every move. I understand, Aunt Donna, and I appreciate it. A week later, Marcus started working at the foundation. His first day was brutal. He met Ms. Naira, a 73-year-old woman who had been placed in a horrible facility by her daughter, who sold the family home and moved to Europe with the money. My daughter told me I was a burden, Ms. Naira told Marcus, that I had lived long enough and it was time for her to enjoy her life. I saw Marcus turn pale listening to the story. It was as if he were seeing his own reflection in a terrible mirror. How do you feel now? Marcus asked Ms. Naira. Some days I still cry, wondering what I did wrong as a mother, but other days I feel grateful that I survived to see that there are good people in the world, like your mother. That night, Marcus came to my apartment and completely broke down. Mom, I can't believe I made you feel the way Ms. Naira felt. I can't believe I was so cruel. Now you know how it feels to be abandoned by the person you love the most, I said. The question is, what are you going to do with that understanding? Over the following months, Marcus worked tirelessly at the foundation. He visited facilities looking for cases of abandonment, helped seniors recover stolen properties, and organized events to give them dignity and community. One day, he surprised me with a proposal. Mom, I want to donate my entire salary to the foundation. Marcus, you need money to live. I live in an apartment you pay for, and I eat food you pay for. The only thing I need is transportation to work. Everything else should go to helping the people I indirectly hurt. It was the first moment in 2 years that I felt genuinely proud of my son. 6 months after Marcus began working with us, we received a case that changed everything. A woman named Donna, who coincidentally had the same name as my sister, had been scammed by her son in a way almost identical to how Marcus had scammed me. The difference was that this Donna didn't have the resources Preston had left me. I want to handle this case personally, Marcus told me when he read the file. Are you sure? It's going to be very painful for you. Exactly. That's why I need to do it. Marcus worked for 3 weeks to gather evidence against this other Donna's son. He used all the legal contacts he had developed, paid private investigators out of his own pocket, and finally managed to get the scammer arrested. When Donna recovered her house and her savings, she hugged me, crying. "Your son is an angel," she told me. "He saved my life." That night, for the first time since that terrible New Year's Eve 2 years ago, Marcus and I had dinner together as mother and son. "Mom," he said while we shared dessert, "I know I can never erase the damage I caused you, but I want you to know that every day I work to be the man Dad wanted me to be. Marcus, your father would have forgiven you a long time ago." And me? I looked him in the eyes. This man who had been my baby, my boy, my greatest disappointment, and now, perhaps, my greatest pride. "I forgive you too, son." Marcus began to cry, and for the first time in 2 years, I hugged him like my little boy. Today, 3 years after that terrible night, I run the most successful foundation in the city for abandoned seniors. We have helped more than 200 people recover their lives, their property, and their dignity. Marcus is my second in command, and every day he proves that people can change if they genuinely want to. Donna, my sister, became the administrative director and keeps everyone organized with her tireless energy. Preston would be proud not only of the foundation, but of how we turned the most painful betrayal of our lives into a force for good. Sometimes I receive letters from Blair in jail, still trying to manipulate me, still blaming others for her crimes. I throw them away without reading past the first line. Some people never change, and that's okay. Not everyone deserves second chances. Marcus, however, earned his, and I earned a new life I never imagined possible. Every morning, I wake up in my beautiful apartment, eat breakfast while reading requests for help from abandoned seniors, and go out to do work that gives meaning to my existence. I am no longer Dahlia, the abandoned old woman begging for compassion. I am Dahlia, the protector, the advocate, the woman who turned her pain into power. Preston taught me that true love is demonstrated by protecting you even after death. Marcus taught me that betrayal can hurt more than any physical blow, and I taught myself that the best revenge is to live so well that your enemies regret ever underestimating you. If you are going through a similar situation, if your own family has abandoned or betrayed you, I want you to know this: you are not alone. You are not a burden. Your life has value no matter your age, and sometimes when all seems lost, life gives you an opportunity to show what you are truly made of. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you liked the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story with love and respect.